everyone. I really relished in the fact for this art journaling class that we concentrated on this new technique and tutorial in the background, and we came out with this really great page for everyone to go home and then finish with other things that they've learned. So we're going to start by prepping our surface. This is just a piece of watercolor paper because it's nice and heavy. And then we are covering it in gesso. This is Blick's gesso. And I really like the thickness of it. I'm brushing it on so that I can make sure it's pretty smooth, and then I can easily cover that way. Just brush it on, and from top to bottom and back and forth. And you can see that I am changing the direction of the brush strokes from horizontal to vertical to diagonal, up and down and up. This helps smooth out the gesso and not create really big, heavy brush strokes that have brush stroke texture, which I'm really trying to avoid in this project specifically, because we're going to do a little bit of glazing later, and I don't want the glaze to work with the brush strokes. I just want it to glaze in general. And then keep in mind, you can always heat your gesso, dry it, I should say, with a heat gun. And you can use a craft gun or a couple other things. But just don't heat it too much or it will start to bubble, right? Especially if you have it on a little bit thick. Now I've got a catalyst, a Princeton catalyst out, and I've got an Unwound Studio stencil. That's the star confetti. And I love these stencils because they're the perfect size to move around and just to use in a small area. I don't have to cover a huge whole entire page. And the patterns in them are really great. But so I'm just scraping some of that same Blick gesso I mentioned earlier. It's thicker than Golden or Liquitex, and I just love the body that it has. So I'm scraping it through the stencil to the paper underneath and creating this kind of like starry curtain shaped effect. You can see it's kind of tall at the top and then it curves around the sides. Now I'm taking some Unwound Studio Star Confetti chipboard pieces, and these stars kind of match the same idea that the stencil has going on, and actually the stencil was modeled after the confetti. But I'm placing these little chipboard stars in the heavier areas of gesso where it's still wet. Now, gesso itself is not really an adhesive. You shouldn't, if you run out of adhesive, you shouldn't necessarily use gesso in place of it. But because we already have some thick areas with the gesso and the stencil, I can kind of embed these chipboard pieces into the gesso and then let it all dry to cure as one. Now, if I hadn't put gesso through the stencil, I would instead use maybe some gel medium to hold down the chipboard, which is really, it's nice and thick, and it'll really hold the chipboard to the paper well. I'm just like giving the gesso double duty here. And then here I go again heating it. And I did mention earlier, if you apply too much heat to gesso, it starts to bubble, and then you don't have it's kind of like warty, and it does create a great texture, but it's not something I was going for in this piece. So just keep that heat gun moving back and forth. The chipboard will start to warm up and kind of hold the heat a little bit, and you don't want to trap too much in there and have it start to bubble all around. So just keep your heat gun moving. And I put some gesso in a little palette and then some water, and I've just watered down that gesso a little bit. And the reason is because I want to whitewash my chipboard stars, but I don't want to use straight gesso because I don't want the gesso, one, to get stuck on the inside of the stars where they're cut out, and two, I don't want to build up gesso around the chipboard stars. I want the stars to be stars, not to be stars in mounds of gesso. So by watering it down, I get just a whitewash, but I also get nice thin gesso that's not going to build up too much. That being said, I wasn't very happy with the amount that the craft color still showed through, so I'm doing a second layer of the whitewash, which in this case is just watered down gesso. And that's a big brush. It's a wash brush. It's wide and flat, and it's really great for adding high amounts of water to things. And you should always rinse your brushes, especially after gesso, acrylics, or oils, because that paint will harden in the bristles and then they could get ruined. And now I'm using Liquitex glazing medium, and it's really, really great stuff. So it extends the life of paint, and so it stays wet, and you'll see exactly what that means, but we're going to mix it together. It's 50-50, and if you live in a warmer, drier place, you may want to do like more like 70% glazing medium, 30% paint. And you can see here I'm adding a little bit more glazing medium. I can tell it's starting to dry. But what it does is it extends the life of your craft, of your paint, whatever paint you're using, so that you can spread it on, and then you can use a baby wipe to wipe away the excess. And then the paint and the glazing medium is going to stay stuck in crevices, in cracks, in little divots, and especially where you've put any type of texture down, like we did with the gesso and the chipboard stars. Now you have to remember that we just put our stars down with the gesso, so you have to be a little more gentle around the stars. Otherwise, you're liable to pick those little babies off, and you don't want that to happen. Then you'll just have, we kind of worked a little bit in the beginning putting those stars down in the quote perfect unquote places. And I did see that there was some white space down there, and I had some gel medium or some glazing medium and some paint left. And so instead of wasting it, I just camouflaged in the area. You can see there one of my stars did come off. I kept trying to put that baby back, but I really think by the end it was done for. And that's all right. One or two casualties out of the whole page is not gonna ruin it. And so I did glaze with, like I said, it was half glazing medium and half paint, but it's just kind of like a warm gray. And this is just craft paint. Now you can use other things, Liquitex, Golden, you can use high flows, or you can use heavy bodies. You just have to kind of go with it. And so in this case, it's more like just a basic acrylic, craft acrylic paint that I was using. And now I've got this really great kind of like orangey, almost like macaroni and cheese color. And I'm adding some glazing medium. And you can see there I did add a little more glazing medium to this than I did originally to the gray. But now I want my stars to look like they're glowing. So I'm just going to dab this just around the stars in certain areas instead of all over. And only the 3D stars. And I'm going to wipe it away in kind of a circular motion around the stars so that it looks more like diffused light coming from them. And also, as far as baby wipes go, the cleaner the baby wipe, the more you're going to wipe away. You'll see there that star came off again. And so I did switch baby wipes to a little bit cleaner, and of course you can fold it in half and find a cleaner area. And I did take a little bit of time to wipe off the stars too. Oh, and then because there's paint left on my baby wipe that hasn't dried, I did rub it a little bit around the paper to kind of bring it all together. There I go, wiping off the orange paint that's on top of my stars, so they still have, so that they're even whiter now with a little bit more of a white sheen. And then give everything a heat dry. Oh yeah, I was doing a little playing, but I ended up taking these back off. Anyway, so from here, I just suggest, I suggested to the class that this be homework now, because we spent a lot of time kind of talking about glazing and the effects that it has and going back and forth between some colors. So you, of course, are more than welcome to finish your page and share it with us in the group, but I just said go ahead and do whatever you like, or maybe some of your favorite things you've learned before. Whether it's like faux metal or whatever, just anything. And I welcome you back to share your finished project with us. I will have my finished project on the blog soon. This video is only available via either class attendance or paid for subscription. But from this point forward, I will be videotaping the rest of the project just for my regular YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining me again, and I'm glad to have you each and every time. Thanks so much.